given a name to my pain. The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham. You don't really think you'll win, do you? I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to episode 141 of the Batman on Film podcast. BOF is the sponsor as well as a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. Check out all the shows over at batmanpodcastnetwork.com and follow our Twitter at BatPodNetwork. If you're listening to us on iTunes, if you take the time to rate and review the show, we'll read it on the air if it's a, halfway decent review. BOF is also now on Patreon if you like what we do here at BOF, whether it's the podcasts, vlogs, or the website itself, and you want to help support us if you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/BatmanOnFilm and sign up. I'm your host for today's episode, Ryan Haas, and on today's show, we are going to have an in-depth discussion of the landmark 1000th issue of Batman's flagship title, Detective Comics. And to do that, I have some folks with me on today's show, and one of those people is Ryan Lauer. How are you doing?
I am great. Thanks for having me on, Mr. Haas.
Yes. Definitely wanted to have you on because you keep up with the comics.
Yes, sir, I do.
Like, very religiously, which is good because Detective 1000 is kind of a doozy. And
yeah.
Speaking of which, we also have Pete Verra with us tonight.
Hello, BOFers.
Oh.
It is a pleasure.
That's the After Dark voice right there.
That is.
Yeah.
Sultry BOF After
Welcome
Dark.
to Gotham Radio here. After
geez.
hours.
Detective 1000.
It's about to get steamy and
It's weird. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
or something. But definitely wanted to have Pete on because Pete, you review Detective Comics for Batman on Film, and you've been doing it. Do you remember which issue you started on BOF with? It's been a while.
I believe it's been, I want to say it's 2 years going.
You covered a ton of the Tynan run.
I did, yeah. I want to say, like, I feel like, when did Tynan start?
He started with Rebirth.
Yeah, but what number was that?
Like 936 or something.
So I probably started around 940 something, late 940s, early 950s.
Okay.
That's where I feel like I started.
Man. That's
So
a lot. That's like 50
I've been doing
issues.
a lot of it.
Yeah.
I did, yeah. I feel like I did most of the time. I did most of the Tynan run and everything else after it.
You did all of them except one in which I had to step in.
Somebody,
and
had to go to the bullpen.
The page views on that review, like, it almost broke Batman on Film. No big deal. Whatever.
It's a big hit. Detective Comics, everybody reads it. That's the reason why it's been 1,000 issues.
Yeah.
Well, everybody that's smart reads it. By the way, if we're talking about Detective Comics 1000 here, and we did do an episode way back on episode 117 of the BOF podcast. We did me, Pete, Rob, and Terrence from the Rob and Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. We did like a giant 3-hour podcast that goes over James Tynan's entire 48-issue Detective Comics
Forgot
run.
about that.
Yes,
That was a long one.
It was a doozy, but we really felt like we needed to give that run its proper due. So
I'm a big fan of that run. Some people give it a lot of crap.
Well, obviously, yeah.
I think it's fantastic. It's a 90s comic reader's dream.
But yeah, that's a great way to put it, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
If you grew up reading 90s comics, I can't see how you don't like Tynan's run there.
Yeah. Oh, we have one more person here with us today.
What?
Yeah. We
Who
have.
could that be?
Well, if you're a detective and you listen to our show on Batman's No Guns, No Killing Rule, you might notice the voice of returning guest Jay Yaws. How are you doing?
I'm excellent, Ryan. I am nice and clean now. So
nice.
So thank you. I was.
We gave you the time to
Yes.
to get fresh for the podcast, so
Yes.
all the listeners can experience it.
Context, Ryan. DM'd me on Twitter about 20 minutes ago asking if I wanted to be on the episode. I told him I'm jumping in the shower. Give me about 10 minutes and then I will gladly join. So I took a really quick shower. I smell presentable.
Like Old Spice?
Fantastic.
Here we are.
You told that story wrong. You need to say, so I took a shower and now it's nice.
Speaking of steamy.
Speaking of BOF After Dark. And,
late night text.
I'm just wearing a towel. Kind of like, what's it, Tom Berenger.
Tom, what?
What?
All the grandpas in the audience understood that reference, I guess. But that's
anyway. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Let's segue out of that as fast as possible. So, yeah, it's a fun thing as a podcaster to be like, hey, we're doing this show and we have 3 people, but 4 people would be even better. But who could I possibly ask on short notice to review a comic book that not very many people have read yet? And so I thought Jay fit the bill, and he sure enough was available. So really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
So like I was saying, we are going to talk about Detective Comics 1000 tonight, and yes, we are much like our show that we did for Batman 50 last year. We are recording this early, and we are using our early comic book reviewing privileges to get a show out for you guys to listen and celebrate this momentous occasion. It's one of those things where it's like, put that privilege to good use kind of thing, and it worked out really well, I thought, for Batman 50. So
I was supposed to have read this first?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good, because I did. I just wanted
Okay. Well, it's nice talking to you, Jay.
So spoilers if you haven't read this, but if you're listening to a Batman podcast about this, I'm sure you've read it. So, So talking about the hype about Detective 1000, it's been pretty big, right? Last year we also had the hype for Action Comics 1000, and there has yet to, we're recording this on the Monday leading into the Wednesday release of this, and in my opinion, I think that they've handled like maybe the Action release a little bit better than this one. This one feels a little bit more scatterbrained to me, but maybe that's just me. Want to talk about what your guys' experience has been so far on the Detective 1000 hype.
No, it kind of comes back to my feelings on the issue as a whole too. I feel like Action 1000 was like a celebration. Let's celebrate Superman, celebrate 1000 issues of Action Comics, and Detective Comics 1000 doesn't necessarily feel like they aren't into it and they aren't hyping it up, but it almost feels like it's just a matter of fact that everyone's going to enjoy and be on board for 1000 issues of Detective Comics and 973 issues of Batman, if I did my math correctly. Yes, I believe I did. Oh, so yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel as tight and cohesive as the Action Comics celebration of last year.
I will say the Action Comics 1000 release felt more like a larger scaled event. Like, there's just not a whole lot of pub. I mean, even like the hashtags Long Live the Bat and Batman 80, like, kind of, like...
I just feel like they started marketing this thing, like, a week ago instead of months ago.
I felt like Action was so built up. And me personally, like, when they started doing the Action stuff, like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, Detective's right around the corner. So I've kind of been, like, hyping this up myself slowly but surely over, like, the year. And, I think the issue speaks for itself. I think it's a really great issue. It's it's one of the better 100-page books that they're going to steal my $10 from. Like, I can't really complain about.
Like, let's be honest.
Yeah. With the variants, so you're thinking, like, I'm probably going to spend, like, $50 on this book at least, right? I'll buy, like, 5 variants, probably. I'll pull a Rob Myers. And,
Yeah.
But it's a really great issue overall. Like, most times, like, when you do one of these, like, big celebratory issues and you get, like, a writer to do 4 or 5 pages, it doesn't really come out and things seem a little rushed, but this seemed really well balanced. So the quality of the book is great. I just feel like they're missing the ball promoting it, even on Twitter and stuff like that. Like, it's kind of almost silent.
Yeah. I mean, we are recording a little bit early, but I my plans though is one of my local comic book stores is doing a midnight release for this, and they also did a midnight release for Action. So I'm going to go to. So I went to that one. So I'm definitely going to go to this Detective 1000 release to kind of compare and celebrate and see what they do. To celebrate the issue.
Kind of like Pete said. So last year when they did the the Action release, and it was known of, hey, next year it's going to be Detective, I started to get really excited for the fact of, oh, they're going to go all out for Batman. They have to, because it's Batman and yada, yada, yada. And I, too, have kind of felt like it's a little like, oh, yeah, it's coming. Because, I mean, his first appearance was also in March, so you'd think that that'd be... that'd also be a bigger emphasis in some cases.
Yeah, because it's Batman's 80th anniversary.
Exactly, 80 years ago, blah 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 and stuff. And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we've got this big issue, and there's some variants, and there we go. But I mean, the good thing is, at least I kind of feel like Superman, the Action Comics, it's like once that issue came out, then it was kind of like, all right, celebration's kind of over. Whether that's true or not,
I think this is going to be a year-long thing for Batman. Probably.
Yeah, and I mean, from my comic craziness perspective, I mean, they've got 3 more Batman Absolutes coming out this year. They've got a Batman the Ultimate Visual History book that I just discovered this past week on Amazon that comes out in October. So it's, and then not to mention when they did DC sent the release about celebrating all year, and that they've got retail partners, and they don't have details of what kind of stuff they're going to be selling through that, but it's
going to be more than just one event.
It's like the celebration doesn't end after Wednesday. So
what were the absolute editions?
The absolutes for Morrison's Arkham, Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum.
Really?
Yeah, that one is in September. In May is the Black Mirror.
Yeah, okay. I'll get into that. I might buy that one.
And then Dark Knight, the Master Race is in December.
It's an absolute edition, too?
Yeah.
Wow. Already?
Oh, man, I'm doing that.
Did the other two have absolute editions?
Yeah, all 3
they're combined into
absolute.
one, aren't they?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's Absolute Dark Knight. Has Dark Knight Returns and Strikes Again.
That's the only way you can get people to buy Strikes Again, is you got to cram it in with the others.
Yeah. You're not even joking.
But I mean, those 3, that's going to be expensive stuff, but they will be on my bookshelf.
I'm mad that they canceled that Hush omnibus. I was looking forward to that. That's stupid.
Yeah. Arkham Asylum. Wait, when did you say that comes out? Does that come out in time for Joker?
Arkham is October?
Yeah.
September.
Or September?
So it should be, yeah.
So starting the hype train.
Yep.
The Pete Verra hype train.
Yeah, and to some of the point about this being kind of a muted celebration, I think a lot of it too is DC is always promoting something Batman. There's a Batman Day. There's always going to be Batman.
That's in September.
Yeah.
And I think that thing mentions it too, like the Long Live the Bat press release was like, oh yeah, plus there's definitely Batman Day this year.
It almost feels a little like we're going through like Batman fatigue, but we have something to celebrate. It does kind of have that feeling to it. So it's a good observation, Jay. It's there's always something out there.
Yeah, exactly. But with Superman, it almost felt like for years or even decades, DC didn't know what to do with Superman, or almost kind of, put him on the sidelines. So then approaching, the 1,000 issues of Action Comics and then his 80th birthday last year, DC was maybe kind of trying to make up for, if not lost time, then lack of internal enthusiasm for him, because I wouldn't necessarily say he needed it, quote unquote, but it was good to see the publisher acknowledging how important Superman is to the line.
And that's and also wasn't that like the first comic book ever to reach 1,000 issues? Like that's also a milestone.
Yeah, I don't know of any other book outside of these 2 that have reached 1,000 issues.
Spider-Man. No, that was 800, wasn't it? So yeah, no. I think that's it.
It's you wonder, without the New 52, like when exactly would we have really done this? There's like 52 issues of New 52 somewhere that kind of like throw everything off balance.
Well, they counted New 52 into the detective numbers when Rebirth started,
and Action Comics too.
And Action Comics as well. That's probably a side goal of Rebirth, to be like, guys, we got to get the numbering back so we can sell 1,000 issue copies
we really screwed this up.
That definitely played into at least some of that, was the approaching 1,000th issue of Action.
Yeah. And the variants are insane. Like there's a lot of, they do the same pattern as the Action 1000, where the retail variants, you have they're decade based. So you have one for 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, and current, I guess. And what's cool about those is they're all styled in the generally speaking, the style of the era. And what I like is the branding of the Detective Comics logo in all those variants is appropriate to the time period as well. So if you look at all the variants, they kind of, the Detective Comics logo.
Texas versions, but the only one that really strikes me as ugly is the Frank Miller one. It's just, Frank Miller's artwork has really gone downhill lately.
He needs to stop drawing.
It's
He did a Captain America variant last year that was actually pretty good.
Okay.
For latter day Frank Miller, but it was still pretty. It was still pretty good. I think a lot of it was the coloring and the inking on it, and I kind of saved it. Which
I don't think I've ever seen him draw Captain America. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't bad. Look, I think it was just Captain America #1. I think that was the Ta-Nehisi Coates that new run there. Yeah, it's not bad.
Cool. Oh, and I think that there's also like a lot of individual variants. Like I think Alex Ross had like Alex Ross painted recreation of Detective 27,
gosh, that was gorgeous.
And it was only available on his website for like 20 seconds before they all got sold out. I tried to get one and I couldn't get it, and now they're on eBay for like an exorbitant amount of money. So I'm pretty pissed off about that.
Put in your email and you can be on the wait list. I'm like, I'm not even gonna try. Don't give me false hope.
Well, I was on the wait list, and then they emailed and they were like, hey, it's on sale, and I was on a plane or something, and then as soon as it landed, it was like, okay, it's all sold out, and I'm like, whoa, no.
I think different chains have variants as well. Like I know Nicola Scott, she did an Action one last year. She did a Batman one in the same style this year with just the different Batmans or Batmen. I don't know how you guys say it. Just kind
all
of
these different eras. And
that's pretty cool. And Jason Fabok, he did one, I think.
Oh, yes.
That one looks so
beautiful.
Good. And I believe, I don't know what this one is, but my local comic retailer said that they also have a midnight release variant of the cover as well.
The one that really catches my eye, and this is just one of the main variants, but I really like the Jock variant. It's just, it's really just pretty much his eyes and his chin, and he looks like he's in some rain, and it's very simple. Yeah. And I like that one. I mean, and there's a Tim Sale one that I can't pass up. I'll buy anything Tim Sale.
Yeah.
Mine, I'll probably grab the Steve Rude 1930s one. Makes me think definitely Matt Wagner.
That one was really cool,
That one's really cool painted. And then we'll just see how saucy I feel come Wednesday on if I either do Tim Sale or the Bruce Timm one. It's probably going to be the Bruce
That's
Timm
my
one.
favorite
the
one.
The Bruce Timm one looks
bunch.
interesting to me. It's interesting seeing him adapt a different era of art.
He's adapting a Dick Sprang cover or something, I believe, right? Or a Jerry Robinson cover. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the regular Jim Lee cover, of course. He had Jim Lee do the main cover. I'm going to get the Jim Lee cover, all of the decade variants, and the midnight release one. So that's my
Ryan
plan.
Hawes dropping some cash, boys. Must be pay week.
I like.
Well, I got to pre-order. I pre-ordered them from my comic shop for like half off.
Nice.
All of them were like half off
you.
or whatever.
Yeah, I like the Jim Lee cover for Detective more than I like Jim Lee's main cover for Action, which I just got his cover last year, and I kind of regret that I didn't get like the Patrick Gleason or like the Dan Jurgens one. I really liked those.
Oh yeah, those were cool.
I bought a bunch of Action ones. I really liked them.
Yeah,
I did too.
This year I just who did we decide it was? It was the 50s. Michael Cho. That's the variant that I pre-ordered. I just like the goofy, crazy 50s weirdness of the multicolored Batman, and then Rip Van Winkle Batman and everything.
That's like a made up story too, right? The Night of 1,000 Batmans.
I think so. Yeah,
I would assume it's probably, but it's like it could totally have been.
If not, it should have been
a story, because like all those Batmen on that cover I would venture to guess, were actual Batman.
Oh,
that
I
were
recognize
in the
most of
stories.
them. There's
Yeah,
like
the old
Zebra,
man Batman, the
Zebra
little kid, the
Batman.
zebra, the
Rainbow
rainbow.
Batman.
Like those are all real, from real issues. The tank, the fish tank one. He was like in a. I remember Batman had like it was like the mermaid Batman or something like that. The caveman Batman.
I think your midnight release variant is a vertical variant of Jim Lee's cover, so it's all on one page instead
Okay,
of
that's
front
cool.
and back. So
That's neat.
that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'm probably going to try to like I don't know. Maybe I'll do a Twitter live thing and kind of live stream like what's going on at
The
midnight.
madness of Detective 1000.
Yeah, it'll probably be like 3 like sweaties, like comic book fans just standing around getting their variants. It's probably not going to be awesome, but they said they're going to be playing some of the Batman movies in the background, stuff like that. I think no, they also did a wedding party for Batman 50, and they had like a wedding cake, and they had like
Was Jordan
Batman
there?
cosplayers. No,
For a wedding that didn't happen.
yeah.
You know, if your
Ugh.
comic shop needs music in the background, there might be a playlist on BOF they could play that's kind of relevant. Just saying.
Party man.
Might be a top 10 list on the website.
Yeah, Ryan, so maybe your comic shop will be blasting Kiss from a Rose.
As they should be.
Oh, that would be sweet.
As it should be.
That was the #1 Batman song as rated by Batman on Films. Peter Verra.
I don't know how
That was a
you
great
can
article,
deny
by the way. Yeah,
it.
read
It was
Pete's
fun.
article.
It was really fun to write. You know, just staying up late and listening to soundtracks.
His
Cool
After
jams.
Dark jam.
Moving
Kiss
and
from a
grooving, as you
Rose.
said in the article.
Yeah. It's
Barbecue bangers.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. There's a lot of. There's just a lot. It's funny how much good music has come out of the Batman movies.
Yeah.
You know, solid '90s tracks, good alternative rock.
Yeah. Yep. And it's cool to, like you said in the article, it's cool to see that kind of reemerge its head again, like with the Suicide Squad soundtrack and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But so in terms of like the launch and the covers, we kind of talked about that. Because Pete, you're reviewing Detective for the site. I kind of wanted another thing that led into the build up for this that they didn't really do for Action is that they had like a whole countdown to 1000 banner heading thing on the entire previous arc of Detective Comics, right? So like
Yeah,
that
it was
was
all-
when
Tom
go
and Z
ahead.
basically took over, and he basically started kind of building towards Detective 1000. You know, whereas basically this mysterious figure is taking out Batman's mentors, or or trying to, whether it was Mr. Miracle or Ducard, or
Leslie Tompkins straight
Leslie
up
Tompkins
dies.
was in there. Yeah, and it was just it's
Ducard.
interesting to see. Yeah, Tom and Z like kind of really kind of put the mystery and detective work back into Detective Comics. Like Robinson did it slightly before him, but Tom and Z really took it to like a whole new level. And
It's almost like each issue. What was it? Was it 6 issues?
yeah,
And they
started in
to me,
994, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started like 994.
so like each part of that story seemed to like it focused on a different part of Batman's detective skills to me.
Yeah, it was just depending on like it basically focused on who he learned what from.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
Mr. Miracle taught him how to like dislocate his shoulder and get out of chains and hold his breath and all this stuff, and Leslie
Yeah.
Tompkins taught him compassion and and when enough is enough, not to be such the brute that that your emotions allow you to be. And
Right.
while my problem with the arc was actually $9.99, I didn't enjoy $9.99.
You didn't know like the way it ends.
yeah,
Well,
it kind
for
of felt
me-
like a little bit of a letdown.
Well, for me, as soon as Leslie Tompkins died, I was like, and then when Alfred kind of gets injured and stuff, I'm like, okay, something's going on here. Obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, I was waiting for something like what happened to happen, so I wasn't disappointed or caught off guard too much. I just liked that it was kind of a. I like that it was kind of a quintessential-ish reflection on Batman as a detective in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, and it felt to me like cool cross between and as Tomasi's first major like entry in Detective Comics, I thought it was very fitting, and it felt like he took kind of a Grant Morrison inspired kind of twist at the end to me.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, he kind of took the "it's all a dream" kind of premise, but kind of made it interesting enough to where it still made sense, and it wasn't kind of like completely weird to me.
There's a lot of things Tomasi really gets right about the character. Like, he really can get inside Batman's head, and he really knows how to write him. So, like, there's at one point where like Batman's fighting this mutiny thing that looks like Batman but isn't Batman, and he's like, is it a clone? What is it? And it's just like, because basically like the inner monologue is so good, you're kind of like, I can look past the stupidity of what he's actually doing, because like what I'm reading is so really great and amazing. And really just definitive, almost. Yeah, like he knows what Batman thinks and how he strategizes and how he operates and how he moves. So,
even as I was,
it just keeps you pumped up for it.
Yeah, well, even the smaller moments. Even I was reading this arc today in preparation for this podcast, and I tweeted out a panel from it that really, with the current conversations going on, really kind of struck me as really poignant.
It was Batman
statement
Ducard,
on the
right?
character. Yeah, it was Batman with Ducard, and Ducard says, "Your distaste for firearms against your prey is still a thing." And Batman says, "My prey's learned I don't need a gun to hurt or stop them." And I was like, "Oh, that is great."
That's perfect
and
timing.
that's something I've pretty much heard verbatim from Denny O'Neil in some of the interviews I've heard of him as well. So I thought that was kind of a great thing to see in a comic book. I like when that kind of stuff gets reaffirmed, in the comics.
Well, it also makes you feel like the writers, they pay attention to the way the character's interpreted in other mediums. So therefore their writings reflect current events almost,
Yeah.
So it's refreshing that it's, like I said, like Tomasi just knows the character so well. Like, he's not going to get fooled by like, everyone just wants this right now. Like, he's like, no, but like, this is who Batman is.
Yeah. And you know what's cool about that is that knowing how the arc ends, it's almost like that scene and scenario is like put there on purpose to test Batman's code, and because Batman's confronted with it, and that he was still able to pull that response out. I think
that's exactly what it is, because in the essence he's testing himself.
Exactly. Isn't that great?
He said, I do this, to kill myself effectively. So symbolically, even, him, breaking his code would be killing Batman.
So I liked the run until 999. I was in, and I really dug the message, and I still dig the message. It's just, I feel duped. I hate the concept of anything in watching or reading where it's just a dream.
Preach.
Or imagine that, hey, what if this happened at this time period? And it's just, it didn't. I don't want to say it didn't mean anything, but to me it ends up as a letdown, because I'm like, it didn't matter. And then I know the argument of, no, it did, because he checked
creator
himself.
Using time travel to fix his mistakes?
He checked himself, and he always does, to make sure that he's before he wrecks himself. And he I don't know, it's a way for him to, see clearly. I get all that, but I just hate the, oh my gosh, Detective is just insane right now. He was dreaming.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like a
I
cop
think
out.
to me,
it's an easy way out.
I don't think it is as much, because it's kind of one of those things that it works because it knows what medium it's in. It knows it's a comic book. Yeah. And we, as comic book readers, kind of know that too.
But how many times does Batman put himself in like a stasis where he's testing his mental abilities? I almost feel like I've seen this before.
We have, like, that's part of the like that was in Grant Morrison stuff. That was in there too. But to me, it's like, we're comic book readers. We're used to this. We know that, like, even if this was a quote serious or real thing that happens in canon, the next writer on the next issue could just undo it in 2 pages. And so, like, with that in mind, comics are always going to go on. So, I think it uses that kind of thing to its advantage. And the story that was told, I thought, was really well. Like, we just talked 5 minutes about one little panel that I tweeted out or whatever. So that's the kind of stuff that I think is important to pull out of little arcs like this.
I think what the arc's purpose was kind of a reaffirmation of what Batman means to Tomasi, and also
yes, no doubt, yeah.
kind of a mission statement about what he's going to do as well. Because one of the most powerful moments in that whole arc was in 999 when he's digging a grave and he's talking to his younger self, and I don't remember the exact dialogue verbatim, but he effectively says, we didn't have a normal childhood, but think about all the other children who did, because
it's the best part of the book.
And
the thing where he like rises up on the platform and he sees all the people that like died that year or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm like,
how the number's going down until it gets to 0. I mean, that made it was just a dream work, because what they were trying to say with it worked along with it.
Yeah. And I think something to think about too is that this is almost that whole little arc is like the prelude to what Tomasi is going to do over the next however long he's is the steward of Detective Comics. Like, this is just the beginning for him. He's about to launch into a giant arc about the new canon iteration of the Arkham Knight. So Tomasi's just getting started, guys. So I think that
he'll write till issue number 2000 if they let him. So
yeah, and let me tell you, like he wrote for what, like darn near 50 something issues of Superman on Rebirth or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that Superman title was excellent, like really, really, really good. So I can't wait to see.
I could probably count the number
Batman.
of not great issues of comic that Tomasi's written on one hand, if that makes sense.
For real. He's such a good comic book writer. He has a unique voice. He gets the tone and the voice of the characters down so well, but he's able to kind of make interesting stories that work inside of themselves as a comic, but work amongst multiple like stories and books together, as they go on. But he also, I think, as a writer, and this is, I think, very important, at least to me when I read comic books, like, this is kind of stupid, but he doesn't get in his own way too much.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's can be said 100% of the time for some other Batman writers that I've read. I don't
remember where I was listening to maybe another podcast the other day, but somebody said he is a generous writer. He takes other people's ideas and builds off that. Like, he even wrote some of the better Detective Comics issues from around the Super Heavy time when Gordon was Batman.
That's a great example. Yeah, he wrote the pretty thankless job of having to write Detective Comics when Jim Gordon was in the Blue Bunny Batman suit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he wrote like a whole year's worth of issues of that era. Like, take this premise of Jim Gordon's Batman in a robot suit. And
I think a lot of that comes from, I think he started out as an editor. Writing on the side. So exactly. I think he has that mentality of, how am I supporting everybody else?
Here's the structure, make it work, or whatever.
And that's also what I like is, I don't think, and we don't need to go too much into it, I think a lot of people, when they write Batman, they have an idea of the Batman stories they want to tell. Like, almost they want to make Batman fit the story that they have in mind. Whereas Tomasi, I think he just likes Batman and wants to write him.
And it shows.
And that's, I think that's what he did with Superman too. Like, he starts with it's like character first kind of stuff. Yeah. And then the stories come organically out of that. And so I can't wait. And the Arkham Knight thing, like, he's had all this experience. Like, he's written all this. He wrote all these. What's the right word for
he wrote
like,
the
tie-in comics for
another thankless job.
Those are actually fun.
Yeah,
I read them recently.
That's another thankless job.
He wrote all these tie-in comics for the Arkham Knight. The based on the video game stuff, like comic tie-in issues, and so now he's. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's even a giant omnibus of all that stuff, and he wrote the vast majority of it, right? So,
I mean, he's got my attention.
Interesting.
I'm dying to see what he does with the Arkham Knight. Like, this is going to be something we're not expecting.
Yeah, and I'm glad that, like, this is kind of a push for DC to kind of get Detective Comics back into I mean, granted, we didn't have, we weren't off of Tynan that long, but to get Detective Comics back to like it's important too, like it's the flagship title. We can have like it doesn't need to be a anthology title where there's like a different like arc every couple months or whatever. Like I like that there's going to be a new creative team and it's going to be consistent for a while. Like
I think Detective's been just as good as Batman, since Rebirth. Well,
yeah, that's what we thought.
I think it's
Tynan's run.
Yeah, totally. I think it stood toe to toe. I just think the whole Batcat thing just took a mind of its own and just people just ran with it. But hey, look, Tomlin's got a Green Lantern named after him. The guy's amazing, so I'm pumped for it.
Excellent point.
Cool. So let's get into Detective Comics 1000. I mean, we've talked about the hype and the launch and the covers and the arc before this and everything. So Detective Comics itself is kind of a whole other beast in and of itself, right? So it's a darn near 100-page book. It like Action Comics 1000 is an anthology book that has a bunch of different short stories from a bunch of different superstars, I guess you would say, around the DC Comics and Batman Detective Comics history, and it ends with a story that is designed to kind of get you invested or at least tease you for the next big arc coming for the book. So we're just going to go down. We're going to just break down each story and just talk about each story.
Well, can I ask quick?
Yes.
Do you guys like for the 1000 issue that they do that it is like an anthology, or would you have preferred if it was one story for 90 pages or whatever?
If it was something like a Grant Morrison, like I'm building, or like a Nightfall thing where it's like I'm building up this giant story and we need like a 94-page ending, then I would be like, okay, yeah. But otherwise, the fact that it's like 1,000 issues, it's honoring 80 years of this character, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to do the format that they did.
Yeah, I agree. If this was like one person's vision for the 1000th issue, I would have been fine with that. But if it was a bunch of writers and artists coming in to tell one story, I prefer an anthology like we got here.
The thing about the anthology is there's so much great stuff in here. There's a Denny O'Neil story. There's a Paul Dini story. Kevin Smith has a story.
Scott Snyder, Tom King,
Snyder and Capullo. And then, Neil Adams and Chris Priest do a story together. And so you have Priest who's been really doing a great job on Deathstroke. And then the legend that is Neil Adams, it's like the best of the past and the present. So it's a way to celebrate the character and to just display all-star talent at the same time. And this issue particularly, I think, was a home run because I think every story within the issue is told in itself, and it's not rushed, and it doesn't feel like it's crammed. And we'll get into our favorites, but they're all great. It's totally worth the $10, I think. Usually I don't say that, but I think this is a good one.
Yeah, there's something in it for everybody. And I thought it was appropriate to start out with the first story in the book, which is Batman's Longest Case, with Scott Snyder writing and Greg Capullo doing the pencils. And I thought this was cool because it's all about Batman following the thread of these like clues that he got during one of his very first cases as Batman. And I assume you guys picked up on this, but like this is like all in canon. Like the case he's talking about is his very first case, from like the case of the Chemical Syndicate, right? Like, yeah. And I thought that was cool. It's like I love it when newer writers and Grant Morrison did a lot of this, like expand upon really, really old stories and kind of give them new life. So to have Scott Snyder be like, oh yeah, but this thing happened in the very first appearance of Batman that also meant something or whatever. And like the first couple pages of the story have Batman using like his flashlight and like suction cups to climb up a building, and
He's got the purple gloves.
Yeah, I was going to say
and the purple gloves. Like that is like exactly harkens back to kind of the Batman's earliest gadgets in that issue, right?
And,
so what'd you guys think of this one?
I didn't confirm because there's just so many stories, but I'm pretty sure some of the just little individual panels have throwbacks to actual Golden Age stories too, like way back early in the Cane and Finger era. Like where he's reaching for that, like an amulet or an orb,
Yes.
and then when he's kind of in disguise in Egypt. Pretty sure those are callbacks to some stories from the 30s.
Yeah, that would be cool if that's true. To be like, you know, and that would ring true with the beginning of the story too, right? Like this other thing was going on in the background that you didn't know about while you're reading the actual story, right?
Right.
And this, and what we're reading now, is like the quote real story that's happening like behind the scenes.
Yeah, I liked this story. I ended up liking it more than I was kind of at the beginning because it was always enjoyable, and I liked the moving through different eras that Capullo does with the subtle costume changes and even some of his just individual small panels, like where Batman is climbing up a snowy mountain. It's just beautifully colored by I think it's FCO Sensei. Yeah, I mean, just gorgeously colored and really well illustrated. It did feel very like orchestrated and almost like it was overwritten, like maybe too clever. But that's
Scott Snyder for you.
Yeah, but then that was the twist. Was yes, this was all orchestrated
exactly, and that's why it works so good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why it works so well.
Which is what made me go from liking it to not quite loving it, but really liking it, and having this be one of my favorite stories from the issue here.
I agree.
I went from liking it to loving it like you did, but in a different way. Like as soon as Slam Bradley popped up,
exactly.
I was like,
Bradley.
Okay. Did I say his name wrong?
No, it's Slam Bradley.
It's Slam Bradley.
Yeah, Slam.
I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, like what because I mean, in the early to mid 2000s run, Slam was a big part of the Catwoman. So that was my first exposure to the character, and he's kind of almost gone MIA recently. Since then, he hasn't been around too much. So whenever he pops up, it brings a big smile to my face as the other members of the Detective Guild, and you just see the Martian Manhunter and Detective Chimp and Hawkman and Hawkwoman, and it's cool to see because you're like, okay, this is like a sub culture of the Justice League, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a smaller group of heroes, and they're not, you know. It's just cool to see them interacting and like the detectives.
Yeah.
Like, we're the best detectives.
Yeah.
We're trying to solve these unsolved mysteries. And you like, welcome to the club now because you finally solved one. you know?
Slam Bradley does have one of the best names in comics. So
for sure. And that's what a great story to like start Detective Comics 1000 off with, right? Is like no, it's all detective work, and you know, Slam Bradley predates Batman, right? He was in Detective Comics as like one of the main characters before Batman even.
And it was nice seeing Elongated Man in there too. He's been, you know, MIA for way too long. And he's for various unsavory reasons. At
least he's on the Flash.
That's true.
He's great on the Flash. I like him.
But yeah, I mean, I think Batman and even Detective Chimp have both acknowledged that Ralph Dibny might be a better detective than the both of them. So it was nice having him represented here too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Lauer, did you love it?
I did not love it, but I did like it.
You haven't loved anything yet.
We only talked about one story.
That's true.
Oh yeah,
it's okay.
Horses.
I'm gonna have some thoughts about some of the other stories.
There you go.
Me too. We're only 45 minutes in. We talked about one story.
My only part was like in Scott Snyder fashion, he is too clever for his own good sometimes, and so it was like, for example, of like the one line he says higher levels of calcium oxide than modern soda lime silicon. I'm like, I don't give a shit what that is. I don't care what it is. Like it's sometimes just too detailed. Where I'm like, you could have said it's got higher levels of stuff. I'm like, sweet, let's move it along. And it got a little wordy, but I mean, it's also like a bonus of going back and rereading, because then it's like, I don't know, I'm smart, but I'm not that smart sometimes. So I was able to like, okay, I get it now. I get it. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was cool, and like you said, yeah, a good way to kick off the issue is with a detective story.
Cool.
So,
well, in the interest of time, let's move on to the next one.
I'll start this off. I love this one.
Do it.
Boom.
Oh, nice.
There we go.
Now the second one. I mean, we'll save our favorites to the end, I guess, but or our overall favorite. But this is definitely one of my favorites. Manufactured for Use by Kevin Smith, writer, and Jim Lee as pencils. What a interesting and quite lovely combination, in my opinion, on this story. If you like it so much, Lauer, why don't you give us the breakdown?
Yeah, so instantly why I was liking it was, at first I almost thought like, oh, is this Andy Kubert? Because the first couple of panels, and I think the Joker and stuff,
same thing.
Awesome. And I was like, huh, interesting. But then I think it got to like a couple angles of matches, and I was like, wait, no. And then like the third page was the short-eared bat cowl, and I go, that's Jim Lee. Oh my gosh, how did I not know this? But I mean, I was just loving it in the fact of we were getting a run through him fighting the Rogues Gallery. And it's like, oh, this is great. And then with so, you know, you're seeing him taking on the known ones of, you see the Joker, and you see Penguin, and you see Mr. Freeze and the Riddler, but then you get the Onomatopoeia?
Yes.
That's right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is a Kevin Smith.
A Kevin Smith guy, so that was fun. But then it's the whole fact of intercutting between him and buying, I don't know what you call it exactly, but pawn, like a pawn shop, backdoor pawn shop, and you're like, wait, what is he up to? And then, oh, this is the gun that killed the Waynes, and so it was like, oh wow, this kind of took a twist into something else. And then his conversation with Alfred at the end, and how it's kind of like almost a little morbid to add this to your trophies in the Batcave. And then he's like, no, in a sense, it almost comes full circle that the weapon that was used to kill his parents is going to protect him, because he melts it and it becomes the new shield for the logo on his suit. And I just thought that was like, I don't know, that
what a great punchline.
Yeah, exactly.
Story, right?
I'm not going to like over exaggerate, be like, oh my gosh, it was so emotional. It was just like, wow, that is really freaking cool.
What I really loved about this story is that it centers all around the yellow oval.
Yeah.
If you if you're reading through it, like everyone is, and this is like a big part of what the yellow oval stands for, is like Batman always claimed like, well, the first color your eye sees is yellow, so everyone's just naturally drawn to that. It takes away from
put a target on it on itself, and that was in Dark Knight Returns, right?
Yeah. And it's supposed to be the strongest part of the suit and everything like that. So it's cool to see the yellow oval kind of get its due after it's kind of been like kicked to the curb for a few years now. But you know, just the melting down of the gun and the symbolism is very cool, and it's just anytime you could see matches, in the story, in the underground, and not like beating somebody or something like that. But it's just cool to see that alter ego come forward and just do what he did. It was I really enjoyed this one. I think I'm willing to say it's Kevin Smith's best Batman story.
I would not argue with that at all.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that's been written better.
Yeah, I liked this one a lot. This is one of the ones that had a really good intent and a heart behind it, which kind of elevated it for me as well. There are a couple of stories later in the issue as well that their intentions were maybe better than the execution, but it made it worth it for me. This might be a bit of a hot take here, but this I think is some of Jim Lee's best sequential work in a long time. Because, he's been doing a lot of, covers that look great, but hasn't been doing many interiors.
That's a good point. Like, this is, and it's not like, and because it's a more condensed story, it's got to convey a lot of panels and information in a short number of pages. So he's probably forced to draw more like a, quote, real comic book instead of a bunch of splash pages.
Yeah, like when he was the first penciler on the Rebirth Suicide Squad. Like nothing was bad. It just definitely seemed like made to order Jim Lee, which is still better than I would ever be able to do if I ever, if I had a million years to draw something, he's still better than me. But it wasn't particularly inspired, but there was some really good stuff. There were maybe a few panels here and there, some faces and everything. There may be a little rushed and a little sloppy, but I overall really liked just the storytelling in this whole story here.
Like the continuity cop in me was like asking some questions that were like, well, wait, didn't Flashpoint Batman have the Wayne's gun, or wait, didn't Batman use the Wayne's gun like in Batman Year 2? Although it's probably, I don't think it's canon anymore or whatever. So I was thinking of stuff like that, but this story was so like fun and cool and poignant that it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
I do love how Alfred, at one point when he's talking about the gun in the cave, goes, I threw my back out bringing the dinosaur down here. I didn't bother me about that, but this is weird.
Yeah.
I always enjoy Alfred and his dry wit.
I mean, it's such a cool. I love the concept of this story is so cool, and the execution is great, and it's just this great vehicle for Kevin Smith to have a nice, poignant ending, and give Jim Lee the opportunity to make a whole bunch of panels of like every Bat villain fighting Batman
I just
in a
love
really
that
short number of pages.
I just love that Scarface is just screaming at the Oval too. That's all he's doing.
I know.
He's trying to. It looks like he's trying to put out a cigar in his chest.
Yeah. Yeah, and because it's the Oval, like for the most part, all the villains also kind of match that kind of same aesthetic in terms of like their costumes. Like Catwoman is in like that 70s ish era
with the cape and the green.
Like Killer Croc isn't, but whatever.
Firefly wasn't either, pretty sure.
Yeah, but yeah, that one's really cool. Jim Lee's always a highlight, but I think Jim Lee paired with Kevin Smith was just kind of too cool. It kind of lived up to kind of the expectations.
And that's what's special about this book is those pairings. I mentioned Priest and Neil Adams, but Smith and Jim Lee, it's not something you'd think of. You don't think of those two together collaborating. So stuff like this, these anniversary issues, these big celebration issues, they bring the world together in a sense. So
yeah. Well, the next story is a writer penciler pair that we have seen and have worked together quite well before. Which is Paul Dini and Dustin Nguyen for the writer and pencils, and this one was The Legend of Newt Brody.
I love this one.
I thought this one was super fun.
Did you guys also be like, wait, who the hell's Newt Brody? Am I supposed to know who that is?
I was like, is this Harold's uglier brother? Like, who is this guy?
Well, a lot of these stories I know, like because of the format and stuff. I'm just waiting that there's some cool like reveal at the end, and I was waiting for it in this one, and this one had a really cool payoff. I thought, especially we just read a story about Matches Malone, and it kind of dovetails into this one quite nicely. I
thought it was gonna end up being Alfred is who Newt Brody was, so I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't just Alfred.
It was everybody.
Yeah.
It was everybody. And even like in one story, Babs was there with I forget who was wearing the Brody suit at the time, but she was dressed up as like a bunny during a Mad Hatter caper. So it's interesting when you finally see them go undercover. Like we never really see that too much anymore. We got a Matches Malone story in this book, but like it's something that's kind of, it doesn't happen as often as I think it should when you get members of the Bat family that go undercover. I think it's always fun.
And in some ways they can be almost more effective than when they're in their costumes, is when they're in disguise as a bumbling henchman like Newt, kind of take out the Enterprise from the inside.
Yeah. It kind of, and it's Paul Dini, of course, the Batman animated series writer, right? Like it harkens back to like Almost Got Him, where you had, spoilers, where you had Batman masquerading as Killer Croc the whole time. You're just like, wait, Batman actually did a really good job because he can sound and act just like Killer Croc. So
it was a big rock.
It seemed to, yeah. I mean, so this was kind of a cool thing of like Batman passing on that detective. It's like a detective undercover thing to all of his, proteges and Alfred too. So it's a way for everybody to kind of get into the fun. And of course, there was a fun, bullet point at the end with Damien not having a chance to to join in yet. So.
No, there's just a lot of heart in this story, and it just comes through. And Dini just, it's not overly serious, and I feel like that's when Dini's at his best, that's why we have Harley Quinn, and it's not really like poking fun at Batman, it's more or less just embracing a little bit of a lighthearted side, as we're so used to more of a brooding Batman, but this was almost like wholesome,
Yeah.
Well, Wendo, he does a really good job with that too, because I remember discovering him back with the Streets of Gotham series, which ended... Well, no. It was the Heart of Hush series. That's right.
Heart of Hush. Yeah. That was in Streets of Gotham, right?
And then into Streets of...
Or Detective.
It was before... Yeah, it was Detective before Streets of Gotham started. But then he kind of went from there into Lil Gotham, which I thought was great, of like just showing that he can handle like the serious stuff that can be a little dark, but then turn around and do stuff that's really fun as well. So I think this is just a good blend of Dini at his like fun, at the top of his fun game, matched with Wen. It's just, I don't know, another good pairing, like Peter was saying earlier, of good pairings of teams, and this is just another 3 for 3 so far in this issue.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. So 3 for 3. Let's talk about the fourth story.
I like to call this one Batman Battleship. That's what it reminds me of.
The what?
It reminds me of Battleship because he's constantly calling out like D4, F7, 5G.
Yes.
So it's like, I'm like, what is he doing? It's very funny.
It's called this next story is The Batman's Design, and it's by Warren Ellis, writer, and Becky Cloonan, artist, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was the first female artist on a Batman book back in Scott Snyder's run.
Oh, that's a Jay Yaws question. He would know the answer to that one.
Pretty sure, yeah.
That's why he's on the podcast.
I think it was Gotham Academy that she was on.
She probably was, but she, I believe, was the first female artist to pencil the actual Batman title.
Okay.
Like a numbered Batman title.
Probably.
Let's just say that's true until I'm proven wrong.
Yes.
But,
until somebody on Twitter will yell at you.
And then we can just retweet the No Killing podcast just to drive the point home.
Basically, yeah. But I am 99% sure that I'm correct on this one, as with most things. So this
Eric, are you paying attention?
Oh, Holtzman. We love Holtzman.
He's gonna get so mad at me for that one.
And he's gonna be like, I decided not to do this podcast just so Pete could take my spot and make fun of me.
Yes, you did. Anyway.
So I'm going to come out and say it. This story starts a fairly long stretch of stories I really did not like very much. I did not like this one. The next 4 stories after this, I really wasn't a big fan of until we get closer to the end of the issue. This one, I'm
kind of with you.
The art is pretty good. I really like Cloonan's style, and I like Jordi Belair's colors. She's a great colorist, just no matter what she's doing, and I think they fit really well. Looking at it, Pete, like you said, Batman Battleship puts a different spin on it. It makes me look at it from a different angle because it is kind of showing the master strategist that Bruce Wayne is, but I feel like he almost comes off like a sadist in this story. Just it goes beyond calculating, knowing exactly what to do to take these guys down. I'm trying to find a line, but there was a line that stuck out to me, like almost like he's enjoying hurting these guys.
It's the end.
Was it where he's like the fire barrels? Like,
look at me.
Like, I wonder who put those there.
Oh. I was gonna say the end when he's like, "Look at me, I'm already dead, and I haunt the living," or something like that. I'm like, what the hell is
it's
that?
not even that. The ending, it makes like no sense. I have no idea what Ellis is trying to say here. I think it's the page before that where he's like, "As I said, I have a plan. I've studied him. He doesn't know if he's more afraid of dying or living. I'm ready to give that a push." I don't know. It just feels maybe a little too much for me.
A little too harsh for Batman.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the overall conceit of the story, though, where Batman's like, I've got this, like, Home Alone-esque warehouse with all these traps, and I can just, lure some criminals to them to kind of, subdue them.
think it's like...
I think that's kind of a cool idea.
There is a panel where he says, "Do you guys give up, or are you thirsty for more?" I don't know if you guys saw that or not. I thought that was a pretty good panel.
So might as well have.
Yeah.
He unfurls a plan that's like Batman's battle plan. It's drawn in crayon.
Animal.
I love that. It's all in crayon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mirror
Batman's
a lot of
battle plan.
I mirror a lot what Jay has to say about the story. The artwork's the best part about the story. It's just, I kind of expect a little bit more out of Warren Ellis. I did make fun of it, Batman Battleship, but it's like I do kind of see what Ryan says, and it is kind of cool that he knows he's like I can almost push these guys to a place where I'm more familiar with, and they have no idea what's going to hit them. But it's just he does seem like he's gone a little too far on this one.
Yeah, well, like when he says, none of this will kill them; it'll just hurt them. I don't know. That's
well, and he starts the whole thing out with that, like the whole story. How he's like, they're hopped up on illegals. Emulation drugs, and they got all these upgrades in armor. That's great because that means I don't have to be gentle. That means I can.
I think that was the line I was looking for. I was just looking too far.
Yeah.
This is
man. Snyder would have loved this one.
Oh gosh. This is one where the intention wasn't quite realized. Where some of the other stories, the intention of it, kind of elevated it and maybe made up for the shortcomings. This one, whatever the good intentions were, it still kind of sank the story for me. So I wasn't a fan.
Cool. I think that's good enough. I think we move to the next one, which is one that I was looking forward to quite a bit, which was the return of Denny O'Neil as a writer to Detective Comics. So you have Denny O'Neil as writer, Steve Epting as artist, and it's the story is Return to Crime Alley, which is kind of a pseudo sequel to There's No Hope in Crime Alley. There's No Hope in Crime Alley, right? And it kind of is another Leslie Tompkins kind of confronting Bruce with his either the brutality, and it kind of is related a little bit to the previous story. It's kind of Bruce's need for violence to solve problems.
Yeah, I'm going to contradict myself here, like where I didn't really appreciate Batman's brutality in the last story. I did in this one, but I think it's because Leslie grounded him at the end. I appreciate how she's kind of like that force where she can break him out of his own rage, in a sense. It's like he can lose it, but like he can, which is what like a Leslie or an Alfred or a Robin, they'll bring him back, which is why we need those characters, because he can go too far.
Exactly.
So I really did enjoy the story a lot, but I definitely am contradicting myself.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. I wish there was a couple little things in it to make the end a little bit stronger for me, but there's obviously some great execution in here. Like there's that line at the end where he's like, you think you can hide behind that mask, when he's like punching the guy's masks off, and really it's again kind of goes to the point of the story where it's like, well, he's really kind of saying that about himself too.
I will compliment the art. There's the one page that's got like Batman overlooking like his parents being killed. I think that's a really good, striking image, and I think that's where my positivity ends.
Yeah,
because I don't really care for the rest of the story. I thought, why is she yelling Bruce? These kids are so smart these days. They've got their phone out, probably recording it. They're going to deduce it's Bruce Wayne.
That that
joking.
bugged me too.
But I don't.
Yeah,
I understand that that's like
my issue.
getting, instead of saying Batman, it's saying Bruce, because that's going to connect more and be a little bit more
But
striking.
then again, they don't think he's Batman. They think he's just some guy on Halloween.
Yeah.
You know, it is Halloween night, so they try to use that.
But I mean, I just think she's, I don't know. It's usually Leslie Tompkins to me is very like a comforting character, and though she grounds him and speaks her mind to him, like I don't know, she just came off like a little like against him, and just I just didn't like it.
She
at all.
often does, though. A lot of times she does.
It's in like a comforting way though, to where it never bugs me, and in this for some reason, it bugs me.
Sometimes it's diametrically opposed.
They've gone at it more than a
Batman.
few occasions. You know, him and Leslie
read
have shared
like
words.
like War Games, War Crimes. Ooh,
Yeah.
man,
It's
Batman
really
has some
heated.
words with her there.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I'm with you, Lauer, on this one. The art was really good. It was really just way too derivative of There's No Hope in Crime Alley, down to the
Right.
You dare pull a gun on me, which, if that's not a direct lift from that earlier story, it's close enough that it just feels like Denny O'Neil is returning to a classic story that, you know, is widely regarded as one of the better Batman stories ever written. And he's really not saying anything new with this. And it just kind of ends, which makes me think, what was he even trying to say with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was saying, I wish it was. I mean, this is some of the other stories are 10 pages. This one's only 8. I kind of wish there was a little bit more heft to it to kind of get its point across a little bit more.
So I mean, to that point, even this maybe wasn't the worst story in the collection, but it was maybe the biggest disappointment for me, just because what I was expecting of it, returning to that thematic material, and then it just not working for me really at all.
I'll say they drew Leslie a little older than I would have liked. She looks kind of grandma-y.
See, I don't like her when she's like younger, like she's been in the past couple of years. But yeah, she looks a little, you know, too great grandma-ish. I think she and Alfred are maybe close.
They need to draw her in between. Figure out a combination, but like in the middle between old grandma and Marina Baccarin. You know,
shoot for like a Helen Mirren, guys.
Or take the Spider-Man route and make it, you know.
Yeah. Aunt May and Into the Spider-Verse, you know, was good balance.
You just make her Marissa Tomei and be done with it.
Gosh.
But, you know, so this was a Denny O'Neil story, and the story right after this was illustrated by his frequent collaborator back in the day, Neil Adams, and iconic, legendary, you know, artist Neil Adams. And this story is called Heretic. Neil Adams, of course, is the artist, and Christopher Priest is the writer. What did you guys think of this one?
I love Neil Adams' artwork. Like, that's going to be the first thing I talk about whenever I talk about Neil. I mean, from his definitive sports car Batmobile to just you know, the way he draws Batman and just people in general. I'll always love a Neil Adams drawn book. You know, a Neil Adams written book is something to be very, very weary of. But always seeing Neil draw, you know, is always a pleasure. But like this might have been like one of my least favorite stories in the book, believe it or not. Even though I was very hyped for the pairing going into it, it just didn't really resonate with me.
I'm very, very hot and cold, more cold toward Christopher Priest writing. He's not a bad writer. It's just a little bit of his style can go a long way with me. And I'm not going to lie. I read this story. I remember reading the story. For the life of me, I could not remember what the story was actually about until I started flipping
that was
back
my
through
problem
it.
too.
I was a little empty by the end. I was like, wait, what's the point of this?
Yeah.
I gotta go back and look this over now.
The punchline's kind of interesting that the like the twist at the end that this brother of this, you know, assassin or you know, member of the assassins was lured and not was lured by money. But I don't think they actually that really came together until there was that panel of him holding Bruce Wayne's wallet, and then the story just ends. So there was something.
It just ends.
Yeah, there's something
with the beginning
interesting there. It's just there really wasn't much else there.
Yeah, And the way the story is kind of broken up into these like very discrete sections,
which is a very Christopher Priest thing to do.
Yeah, and it's kind of a Neil Adams thing too. Like if you read some of his other books, like that he's written, like Batman Odyssey, they're kind of written with that really stilted kind of like jump cut kind of thing.
How do you make Batman riding a dinosaur the worst Batman story I've ever read?
It looks Batman Odyssey is the definitive Neil Adams book because it is stunning to look at, but do not even bother reading it. Just don't.
And there's a hippo man that shoots machine guns, and it's the worst Batman story I've ever read.
Oh my god, it's so bad.
It is something
I dodged
else.
a bullet there. I did not.
You haven't read it?
No.
Oh,
I didn't like the artwork of it.
It is almost worth reading just to see how bad it is. Like just to see where
it's
the basement is.
What's worse, Strikes Again or Odyssey?
I was about to say it makes Strikes Again look like
Strikes Again is shorter, and there's at least like the Plastic Man stuff in it is pretty good, and the Flash and the Atom were actually characterized pretty well. But yeah, I mean, Strikes Again is at least readable. Batman Odyssey is barely. I barely got through it.
The best thing about this story is it gives you like a little annotation to tell you to go read Batman Volume 1, 431.
That was
interesting. I want to do that too.
Yeah, that's what I got out of this. Like, I want to read this back issue.
I did like the editor's notes there. That was cool that they threw that in there. And it wasn't like, hey, go read this Rebirth story that came out 2 months ago.
Exactly.
It was
go read that classic. Which is for some reason I'm thinking this is probably an issue that Neil Adams actually drew. Like that's kind of like his time frame. No,
probably
I can check.
It probably is. I was going to
70s.
say what I'm going to look it up right now. Batman 431. What is that cover? Oh no, that's newer than I thought. Oh man, I've got that issue pulled out. I want to read. I've actually been meaning to reread this or to read this issue. It's a Jim Aparo issue, and it is like that. It's one of those books
great.
that it's a Christopher Priest was the writer on it. How about that? It's like probably a sequel to that story. How about that? So yeah, it's a Christopher Priest story then as well. Because I saw some panels from that story and it looked like it's something that Batman Begins took some inspiration from about Bruce traveling to the Himalayas and to the League of Assassins. So yeah,
I
it's
didn't know
definitely
Priest was writing
probably
Batman
worth.
back then. Jeez, 89. Wow.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. But yeah, that's the best thing that came out of this was I want to go read 431.
Yeah, I mean, silver lining, it made me want to read older, better Batman comics.
So I don't think we were all the biggest fans of that one, but the next one was kind of interesting. It's called
I love
I
this
Know.
one.
Yeah.
It's called I Know. Brian Michael Bendis writer. He's a veteran comics writer, but pretty new to the DC stable. And Alex Maleev, art and colors. And this one, to me, at first, I was like, "Oh, is this the? Is this?" I was making me think that it was like this is the Tom King story because it felt to me like maybe this was like a spiritual, brother to the the future Superman story from Detective from Action Comics 1000.
It does read kind of like a Tom King story, in a good way. I don't necessarily mean that as a slight.
Well, especially when it started out with like the Penguin just like making these sounds,
Yep.
I was like, that's a Tom King thing, and then I got to the next page. I'm like, oh, it's not Tom King.
No, the next page you got the penguins from Batman Returns. I was so excited.
There's so
Of
many
course.
alluding
couldn't get
to
happier.
Batman Returns, because then even panels later of how he looks just like Danny DeVito, underneath the umbrella and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. Where's the duck? Where's the duck?
Oh my god, get the duck!
They didn't need a duck.
I love the duck. I love the duck. No, this was great because I felt like a fun Batman story to me. Typical Penguin. He always thinks he's got the upper hand on Batman until the very last minute, and it's great the way it ends.
Shocks, and then it's just great too. Good visit. That's the last words. Yeah, good visit.
Is this Malev's first time drawing Batman in a book? Because I remember he did a lot of like Daredevil. He's done a lot of Marvel stuff. He works very closely with Bendis, so I'm wondering if Bendis brought him over.
Maybe
they did a long run in Daredevil years ago.
It may be, so. And I mean this story was, I liked it. It was fun. The ending was a little kind of okay, that was it. Kind of a a funny ending, but it didn't really end strong. I've been into Daredevil a lot lately, reading a lot of Daredevil stuff. I've just
been very good.
All of a sudden gotten into Daredevil. This makes me want to go and jump into the Bendis Maleev stuff sooner rather than later. I've been working through the Mark Waid run right now.
And if you love trades, Jay, so like this, you get this in trade. It's a big trade. It's like a big $30 trade. You're gonna love it. You're gonna get. There's like 4 volumes of it.
Oh, it's more just a it's only, what am I trying to say? It's super late. I'll get to it eventually. Nothing's really holding me off other than just reading other stuff before it's.
You're going to love it. The artwork's great. The story's great. I mean, it's just fantastic.
So I thought this one was interesting, but I don't know if I call it one of my favorite stories in the book, just because I'm like, I mean, it's trying to like characterize the Penguin as somebody that you don't see him characterized as too much. Yeah, but then again, he is this kind of very opportunistic, kind of character, and it makes sense that he might, hold on to this one secret the whole time for his own advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I always like the idea that Penguin is better as like old crime, like old Gotham crime, and like supervillain trapping. So he's kind of a blend of the two worlds, like before Batman and then after Batman. And
that's a great point.
And I think he's more effective embracing the old crime mentalities, like people have wanted for years. Just have Penguin again in a live action film. I think he would work better as like an arms dealer or broker or something like that.
No Man's Land did it perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure,
something like that where he is a malevolent presence, but he's not actually the main villain. He's just someone there that almost like a Lex Luthor, that he's got shady dealings, just you can't pin anything on him, and that makes him more interesting. So I like him slippery. Like that. So something like this where he has this knowledge that he keeps to himself for his own benefit because he thinks that's what's keeping him alive. It's interesting. It just doesn't quite come together as well as it could have.
But that's the thing too, is like that concept has come up before too with other characters, like it's been long theorized, like the Joker knows exactly who Batman is, but he's choosing to not know or choosing not to tell anybody because he doesn't want it to end either.
And he just doesn't really care because all he cares about is Batman.
Yeah,
right. And I like that's if you keep that in mind, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about in this particular story, when it's like, oh, the Joker is trying to get us in a room to like figure out who Batman is. But like, if you think about that concept in mind, it's like, oh, maybe the Joker's just doing that to like throw everybody off the trail, So I thought that was kind of interesting. But let's move on to the next story. And I was excited to see this pairing, which is Jeff Johns and Kelly Jones, writer and artist. And the story is called The Last Crime in Gotham. And that's what the story literally is. It's definitely one of those like, oh, we're doing this kind of stories. It took me I'm still not sure what I think about this one, but
I love
it was interesting.
Yeah, that first page, and I'm like, okay, interesting. And then you go to the next one, and there's Ace all dressed up, ready to rock.
Yeah, it's kind of where it lost me.
That's what lost you?
Yeah, this is probably
it's like that's what the Bat Family is. Bat Family 2049 or whatever.
Yeah. That, and I think Kelly Jones I really like Kelly Jones's artwork. It's unique. It's different. I think he did a really poor job translating the Joel Jones Catwoman suit into his style. I don't think
that's what
good.
that's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's trying to be. So from one
it's
Jones
trying to
to
convey
another,
a lot,
he didn't do
right?
any favors.
Like there's that, and then you have to have Damian, but Damian's also old, obviously older, but he's still Robin, and you have like a new. It reminded me kind of like Dark Knight 3, actually, where like Superman and Wonder Woman have a daughter, and it's just like, that's a new character. So you have that kind of idea here, where I assume it's Batman and Catwoman's daughter, and she's also a hero, and her name's Echo. Like, has that ever been? This is Jeff Johns too. This is like Jeff Johns' continuity master too, right?
Yeah.
So like, has that ever been established anywhere?
I don't know of any Echo.
Yeah, this reads to me like Johns is trying to make Batman's whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, or is that the
Cape Crusader?
No, the Superman one.
The Superman
Was
one?
it whatever?
I think
happened to
that's
the Man of Tomorrow?
whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost like that, like this dream, like an ideal world where, for Superman, that would be him, still being, on Krypton with his family and then growing up and having a wife and children here. Here, it's Batman, eradicating crime in Gotham with, Catwoman by his side and Damian still being his partner and then having another child and everything. And this is another one that the intentions were fine and everything. I just don't think the execution was there. And Kelly Jones is another one of those that I'm kind of hot and cold on. I loved the Batman Kings of Fear miniseries from last year.
Yeah.
That may be one of my...
That was such a return to form, right?
I mean, his visual storytelling in that was just phenomenal. Usually I think his style is maybe too grotesque and maybe macabre and overly stylized, like better suited for something like Red Rain rather than just a standard Batman story. But I loved what he did there, and that honestly was probably one of my favorite Batman stories of the past several years. So I was excited to see what he could do here, and I just wasn't feeling this very much at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those stories where it's kind of like it's over before you know it's begun, kind of thing. You're like, oh, that was okay. I thought it was interesting that they brought Joker 2 into this. Yeah. Like that is a very like a 60s thing where they had like Batman 2 and Joker 2, like the Joker's son
of Joker,
son of Joker. Yeah, they did a lot of that kind of stuff back in the day, and to have him like sign the card as a J Roman numeral 2, like that's exactly what they would do back in the day. So that's kind of an interesting take on that. But
it was very Silver Age-y. It just wasn't nearly as fun as a Silver Age story.
Yeah,
I do,
and it's one of those that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I do like kind of the mirrored opening and ending where it opens with Bruce striking a match, lighting a candle, and that turns into the bat signal, and then it ends with the bat signal fading into fog and smoke, and then it turns into the smoke coming up from the candle that he's about to blow out. So those are some interesting visual cues. It's just I don't know, just as a whole, this didn't do much for me. Yeah,
and for me, in Detective Comics 1000, it didn't scream Detective Comics to me. I don't know. Maybe to me that's just
there was no case. He was already dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of anticlimactic. It's just okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. And this isn't like I usually enjoy Kelly Jones's artwork, but I did not like it in this story. It felt sloppy. Like there's several panels where wonky faces and they just look weird. I'm very disappointed in this one story.
Who colored him on this?
Michelle Madsen.
Michelle Madsen.
She's been his longtime colorist, so I was wondering if maybe
it looked really similar to the Kings of Fear type color.
They did that like Swamp Thing miniseries from a couple of years ago. I mean, they've worked together for a long time, so I thought maybe this was somebody different who just didn't match. But no.
Echo's cowl too, by the way, is horrible. Like, I don't know what they're. It's at one point.
That's why that's what I was saying. It reminded me of Lara, right, from Dark Knight 3. It's just like kind of too out there.
She's got green gloves too. Where's her green gloves?
Exactly. It's like some wild colors.
Ace does look like a good boy though, so that's
He does.
Yes, he does. I love that Ace has like this. Like the collar is the bat belt. Like that's so badass. I love that.
I'll give him that. That's good.
And it was weird that Damien called Bruce Dad.
Yes.
That
instead of father.
Yeah, that's where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be into this one. It's like right about there.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll see more of Echo at some point. I got a feeling. I don't know.
All right. Well, let's move on. The next story, I think this is probably one of my favorites in the book, actually. It's called The Precedent, and written by James Tynion and penciled by Alvaro Martinez Bueno. And this one is this is one of those where I think like it has a point to it and it executes on it pretty well. I mean, this story is all about, the first line of the story is, I'm worried about the precedent this sets. Like, and what that is the whole story has Bruce contemplating whether he should let Dick Grayson in, as Robin, as a crime-fighting partner to his mission as Batman. And then him and Alfred kind of talk their way through it. And that's always been something interesting to see the comic books kind of deal with and explore over the years of like, why would Batman let Robin in? Why would he, fight crime with a kid and that kind of thing? And I think this is another really clever interpretation or examination of that concept.
Yeah, this is one of my top stories in the book, and it's just just welcoming Tynion back to detective, and then you throw a character which he loves, Robin, into it, and he's able to just kind of build on the relationship of Bruce and Alfred, and how Alfred's like, what you can do for this boy is greater. It's even better. It's even better than what I could have done for you, and you could teach him. He can grow up with you, and then it's like friends and relationships and all this stuff, and it's a really good Batman, Robin, Bruce, Dick story, and I think it really pays off, and it's beautifully written and drawn. I really enjoy this, and I like the last page, the splash page at the end's great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's very definitive and traditional, and it's, if I I liked Batman Forever, but if I can ever get the scene of Dick Grayson, the candle, and Batman, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's stuff like that, and it just gets you in your bat heart, and this is why you love Batman.
Yeah.
Well,
that's great.
Considering that my whole lifetime, Dick Grayson has been Nightwing. Anytime that I can get like a current or like a new story that features Dick as Robin, I'm very
relish it.
I'm in it right away, and so just to have that exploration of back to and a Bruce Alfred conversation, like just a conversation, always draws me in as well. So that part at first, and then it's the discussion of just letting Dick in and their banter back and forth. But when the awesome drawings of like the collage of basically Robin's story and stuff too, it just all worked for me.
And that's one of those things where it's like, well, they really took advantage of the kind of like the Kevin Smith story. It took advantage of the limited number of pages to kind of do some. They're like mini splash pages, built into these panels, and I think it works really well. Like you're talking about modern Dick Grayson as Robin stories. Did any of you guys read the? I haven't read this. That's why I'm asking. Did any of you guys read the semi-recent Nightwing arc that kind of delved back into Robin's past?
No, I did not.
The Untouchable.
I've been reading Nightwing.
By
what was that?
Was it The Untouchable by Sam Humphries?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Was it good?
It was pretty good.
Okay. I was actually talking to Ryan recently. Like I know he hates the guy who writes Nightwing now, but I'm actually into this multiple Nightwing story.
I like some of the ideas, some of the executions off, like some of the stories in Detective 1000 here. But no, I mean, that's yeah. I don't absolutely hate it, but I am ready for Dick to be Nightwing again.
I'm leery to start it, but because I know it's got the whole Rick Grayson.
I mean,
baggage
it is a lot of
like
just
that,
treading
so.
water, just waiting until they let him be Nightwing again.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hate that kind of.
I mean, back to the precedent. This, I loved this one. I'm not always the biggest fan of Tynan's writing. I loved his detective run in the beginning. Kind of tapered off fairly early after maybe the first arc or two. So I didn't love it as much as you guys did, or a lot of people did, either all the way through. And I do think that he can maybe overwrite things sometimes, just with way too much dialogue and exposition. It gets clunky, but this was pretty much perfect. I mean, it is heavy on dialogue, but it serves a point and purpose in the storytelling.
Yeah.
And I mean, I loved it. I loved the back and forth between Bruce and Alfred. I thought that was really effective. And I mean, I just love the meaning of it, not just the giving the crash course on Dick Grayson, who is my personal favorite comic character, is Dick. But also in that theme of, how does this set a precedent for any other child who, needs to be taken in, and what are we going to do about that? So I really liked, I liked that whole theme, and it worked, just marvelously well. And I'm glad that we don't have to see the really goofy looking New 52 Robin costume.
Oh my goodness! Thank goodness. That was probably an explicit mandate from Tynan. He's like, "Hey, just draw the real Robin costume in this."
The only thing I wish is that they would have done the Nightwing with the finger stripes instead of the Rebirth costume. But,
oh my gosh, for sure.
But I mean, I like the Rebirth costume fine, but can't have it all, I guess.
Yeah. What's cool about this story too is that I love stories that kind of embrace retroactive continuity and try to make things make sense after all these years. Like, you couldn't have written this story, when there was only one Robin, because you have to know that there's going to be three Robins and a Batgirl and an Azrael and a Duke Thomas Signal and a Huntress for this story to make sense, but what's great about that is now that all those, extra characters exist and the Bat family exists, that you can make a story like this that explores the idea of they already kind of saw ahead. They saw the future. Batman's not no dummy. He is the world's greatest detective. He kind of did see this coming. And for him to already have that thought in his mind and hash it out with Alfred,
and I like that it
right before Dick Grayson enters. I thought that was pretty brilliant.
And I like that it was full of goodness and optimism and a sense of family, which, I mean, is a big part of Batman's character. I mean, that's why he has Alfred and Jim Gordon and several Robins and Batgirl and Leslie Tompkins. He's trying to rebuild the family that he lost. But that's maybe not...
And that gets reiterated in another story later on.
Yeah, too. I think the next one. And I just really liked that Bruce wasn't hesitant to bring Dick in this story because he didn't trust him, or because but more because he wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do to bring him into his world. It wasn't anything with Bruce having contrary feelings towards somebody, or feeling like I'm a loner and I can't let anybody in, but it is more of a should I let him in, because this will change everything for him and possibly other people in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Any of these stories that can re-examine and reaffirm some of these core tenets of Batman, I think is just marvelous, especially after having 80 years of storytelling, behind it, which again, it reaffirms why these characters matter and why they'll keep mattering for 80 more years. So moving on to the next story. This is the Tom King story. If you're a huge Tom King fan, it's Tom King writer and Tony Daniel and Joel Jones artists on this one, and it's called Batman's Greatest Case. What'd you guys think of this one?
I'm like kind of iffy on it because at some points it's very goofy, but I appreciate the goofiness, coming from certain characters. When Jason constantly thinks he's getting kicked out, like I thought that was cool. He's kind of where he's like, oh, this is it. Like, oh, he's finally going to kick me out. He's going to take the bat off my chest. Like it shows that like, even though Jason's kind of like the oddball, there is some sort of like, I've got to kind of play along at Batman's game. And, I liked everything really going on that wasn't really on the rooftop, kind of. I enjoyed the monologue and him going to the cemetery and everything. And then it all kind of culminates at the end with the group picture. And it's just, it's still weird for me seeing Batman happy, almost like I felt like he's happy that he's got this family that we mentioned in the last story. He's building up this family, his Bat family, because he lost it. Mm-hmm. But it's just a little weird when when he seems like he's happy to me, But I do enjoy it, and the group shot at the end is at least kind of cool. It's some good lock screen material.
Yeah,
I got confused in the dialogue. It definitely made me stop a few times, and like especially in like the first, and I'm just reading it straight from here, and it's like, Richard, Damien, do you know? I know a lot, kid. You're going to need a little more specificity. If you knew a lot, you wouldn't need specificity. And if you knew a lot, you wouldn't be asking me if I knew. Jason doesn't know. You asked him before me. I'm like, what the shit are we talking about?
If you read
here?
that out, if you just read that out to me like verbatim, I would have said, "Hey, I bet that's a Tom King story."
Yeah.
Just because and that's the thing. That this we talked early in this conversation about some of the stories working well when the writer's style not getting in its way, and this one, I think Tom King's style definitely gets in the way a little too much. I mean, it's definitely built towards it's built around this punchline, right? And it shows its hand a little bit too much, and the dialogue does get a little crazy. Like you get that one page of Bruce standing at the grave, and it's just a barrage of overbearing dialogue between all the characters, and it doesn't say which character it is. You're kind of supposed to. I think it's intentionally, a bombardment, just because you're supposed to kind of
figure it out.
Part of the game, you're supposed to figure out who it is that's talking and stuff, but it's a little bit too much. And the conversation, like at the beginning when you were saying, Ryan, like if you just read it out loud to yourself, it's like it's a little bit too clever for its own good for me, and the word reuse, like I need a little bit more specificity. If you knew a lot, you wouldn't need specificity, and if you knew a lot, you wouldn't be. I mean, it's just like repeating words over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. It's just a little too much for me. Although I do like the overall like point of the story.
Yeah, I agree. And
this is definitely one of those stories that the intent and the overall message outweighed anything that any drawbacks. I mean, that was my biggest negative, was that just all the narration got to be too much and too confusing. And it's not like there aren't, I'm scrolling back, I think at least in the Snyder story at the beginning, it had, Bruce's custom, internal monologue, dialogue box. So why couldn't they just do that for everybody else? I mean, it was clearly a stylistic choice. I just don't think it worked. Maybe, like you guys were saying, other than just being, getting swept up in the barrage of dialogue with all these people meeting at one point on a rooftop, and you're not supposed to know where to zero in on these conversations, if that was the point. Mm-hmm. But even then, that doesn't play into what the actual purpose and message of the story is.
Yeah. I do like that Batman apparently has a
camera battering.
Batman doesn't use no iPhone with a delay on it. He has a camera battering.
The Batacam.
Which really, I mean, you can think about it. It probably is a practical thing you could use, like a a batarang that can, or like a surveillance batarang. You can throw it on a wall and take pictures of stuff.
Hey,
That's kind of
if
neat.
Captain Boomerang can have a boomerang with a video camera in Suicide Squad, then so can Batman.
Oh, that's a good point.
And again,
Great point.
Ace
I mean, it
looks
was
like a
Wayne
very
Tech.
good boy.
I'll say
That's true.
Does anyone
Ace
else-
gets his due in this issue for sure.
Does anyone else find it weird that both Alfred and Orphan are unmasked, but Ace is wearing a mask? It's a
I
very
didn't
strange
think about
little
that.
thing.
And I
He's got a domino mask. It's different than the Kelly
That's
Jones
true.
mask.
I will say,
Yeah, but it's earlier in the timeline.
even
so
though
makes sense, I
it
guess.
looks like painted on, this is the best I've seen this new Batgirl costume. I'm really not a fan
Yeah.
of it. I think it's one of
Yeah.
those costumes that is just over designed. Like it's almost perfect.
Yeah.
But there are enough little additions to it, like the spikes on the heels and the
That takes away
Yeah,
from the
that's
overall
like-
aesthetic.
I wish she had a real cowl again.
yeah, and I mean, but I like the way the mask at least looks here because it looks like it covers more of her face than it does in her own title.
It was Sean G. Murphy, right?
Yeah,
He did the redesign.
yeah. So I mean, this is the best I've seen that costume, even if I'm still not a big fan of it.
Yeah. And I'm glad that like most all of the current like Bat family people like get their due in here. Like, yay, thanks for putting Tim Drake in there and spoiler in there. You know what I mean?
I thought it was really weird though. Like she's just on there. She's like, "Can we make out?" Like that's what she's thinking about right now. In front of everybody,
and that's
like, it's
and
just-
yeah, I'm like, oh, that's what represents Tim Drake and spoiler.
Yeah.
And- okay.
yeah,
Not,
like spoiler. They're just
they're more
like,
to that to me, but okay.
you just look at them as horny teens. Is that what you're doing? Is that what you're telling me? Like, it's just I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they all have. That's the kind of thing. Like they all have their like one little
Yeah.
pithy,
And then
like, scene
Barbara
together.
Gordon
The
was like,
Damien and Dick one is good, but yeah, the Barbara Gordon talking
Batwoman.
about.
She's like, "Wait, did you dated Dick Grayson too?" Like I laughed at that one. I was like, "Oh god." But it was okay.
yeah,
Artwork was good.
yeah. And so what happens here is they. I think that was the last regular story in the book,
Yep.
right? So what they do is after that they have a series of some standalone art pages that break up the prologue story at the end of the book that sets up the Arkham Knight. So there's some good spreads here, like the McKellen
The
Yan.
Janlin one's nice.
It is really cool. I mean, it's like a Golden Age Batman, but kind of recolored to be black and gray, which I think is pretty neat. And
very-
the Fabok thing is awesome.
Yeah,
I love the
Russian-esque Riddler
that's-
on the Hanin page. I think that's
Yeah,
how you
yeah,
pronounce
yeah.
it is Mikhail Hanin.
yeah.
He's
yeah.
Brazilian.
The Fabok spread and Anderson spread, I love that one.
me
I
too.
think the Batgirl costume looks really good in that one too.
Yeah, it
He
looks
draws
really good.
Batman like he might be my Batman artist of now. Like, nobody draws Batman
Yeah.
like he does.
Great
and I love
chin.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't discount that. I just like he gives everybody this kind of iconic flair, but keeps their comic book proportions. Everything's consistent between characters too. He reminds me a lot of not like artistically, but like maybe approach wise. He reminds me a lot of like a Graham Nolan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was cool. And then the Amanda Connor one, it took me a minute to be like, wait, what is this?
I thought it was
What's
Jor-El
happening
for
here?
some reason. I look at it, I'm like, what?
Well,
the
I thought it was
Jor-El?
like Zatara
Yeah.
and stuff. I'm like, wait, what? What?
I don't really like this.
But I got it.
Like,
It's the Waynes, right? And the pearls are like a constellation. Oh,
Amanda
okay.
Connor
like
has
it
a
at all.
good style. Kind of cheesecakey with women sometimes, but I mean I like her.
Right.
I like her, very simple, clean lines and everything. She's good artist.
Her stuff on Harley Quinn was great. I mean, she wrote that, and I think her husband Jimmy P drew it. But
Yeah.
they're always a fun combination creatively. And
And I've like met the two of them, and they are just a hoot and a half. Just
Are they?
Really?
Yeah. They seem like they're having a blast, don't they? But yeah. So after that is the last story in Detective Comics number 1000. It's called Medieval, again by a regular team of Peter J. Tomasi, writer, and Doug Mahnke, penciler, and it sets up the Arkham Knight. And structurally, it's kind of similar to the Kevin Smith story, where it's kind of a overall monologue, and it's just a bunch of nice, full page splash pages that kind of set up the villain's motivations for what's to come. And I thought it was a pretty cool lead in. One of those things, in a lot of ways, like what we saw with Rogal Zar in Action Comics 1000. This is probably not going to be essential reading for the next arc, but it's probably a good enough introduction to it.
Yeah, I thought it was fine, and I don't mean that in a negative way at all. I was like, oh, this is cool. I like the art, and yet again another thing of him facing off against his rogues, and all that was just drawn and colored very, very well. And so it's just, oh, cool. And then knowing that this is the last one, that it's, the Arkham Knight's supposed to be in this one, so this is Arkham Knight. And so
I had forgotten that was part of the book until I got to this. I was like, oh, okay, well that's why they separated the art.
It does lay out what may be Arkham Knight's personality and even motivations pretty well, because these are really well illustrated, just splash pages with Batman fighting his rogues, but the Arkham Knight's narration almost sympathizes with the villains, he says the broken who lash out and beg for help the only way they know how, through their smiles, through their laughter, through a fixed grin, set below the sad and mournful eyes of a clown, on the page where he's fighting Joker, and then on the next page where he says that he has no respect for the different or the strange, so this may be a villain that seeks to maybe represent all of the villains in stating that, as a knight, he's on a crusade to fight against another, caped crusader, let's say, and fight against his means and motivations, because he sees that Batman's in the wrong. And, it could be as simple as, he just feels like the villains are misunderstood. It would be very easy to kind of gather that from these few pages here. But, it's still, an interesting take on these different moments throughout Batman's history.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me like the Arkham Knight is somebody that thinks that they understand justice better than Batman. At least that's what I was getting from it. And it seems like a lot of his views are could be in the same realm as what we see with Leslie Tompkins in terms of Batman's use of violence in his fists to solve problems. And I think that maybe that is not a coincidence that Leslie Tompkins was a major part of the immediate previous arc of Detective Comics. Maybe she'll show back up when this new arc gets underway in the next issue.
What I appreciated most about the story is that it didn't really lead you on to even having any guess who the Arkham Knight was. Because when he's first introduced in the game, you really quickly, like, if you know your mythology, you're like, oh, I know who you are.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not obvious, you can't hide it from me. I've been reading this stuff for way too long. I'm not an idiot. But this is like, I'm like, okay, so... And then the previous story, like, Jason's already worried. It's like, could it be Jason? Is Jason worried he's getting kicked off the team, so now he's doing this? Or,
well, they've already said, like,
just...
Arkham Knight is not the identity of the Arkham Knight is not what he is in the games. For this.
So like, he's a new character, which is great, because then it's like,
that's what they've said, at least.
Yeah. Well, they say things all the time. It doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
that's what I've come to learn. But it's just the
mystery. As long as it's not Rick Grayson.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, the detective work they've recently put back in the book and making it feel more like Detective Comics. Because like when Tynan first did it was more of a team up book. It was like kind of like the Batman Justice League, and then Robinson did like a short interlude, and then Tomasi is taking over, and it's putting the mystery and the mythology, and it's kind of more of a traditional story now, and that's what I appreciate the most. It's kind of like, okay, you keep me guessing, and now I look forward to buying the book every month, and just because I don't know what's going to happen, it's not really paint by numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that I've been really appreciating about Tomasi's run is just how, not just the return to it being a book that focuses on Batman and his detective skills and things of that nature, but also how it's making Batman's world feel big again.
Sure.
For way too long. Like Bruce Wayne's been an almost non-entity who just exists to be the guy that Batman is when he's not wearing a mask, and even though he has a pretty substantial and expanded supporting cast, everybody is there just for whatever Batman's doing. So I that's what I liked about the mythology arc. I even shameless plug here. I wrote about a couple of the issues over on my site, Comics Now, with some of the different characters, like bringing back Thaddeus Brown, the original Mr. Miracle, and how he had never even been seen in comics continuity since 1971 or whenever that Mr. Miracle #1 came out. But having him be part of Bruce Wayne's training and history made sense. And then bringing in Kyodai Ken, who had never appeared in comics
from the animated series,
he was
right?
in the animated series, hadn't ever appeared in the comics before, other than the animated series tie-ins. As Tomasi's bringing all these other characters in to make Batman's world that much bigger by either introducing somebody who was never a part of it to begin with but makes sense to be a part of it, or somebody who's been a part of one aspect of it in another medium and then bringing him into continuity.
That's what's great about writers like Tomasi, is when you can take concepts like that and make it feel effortless, like, oh, they haven't what do you mean they haven't done this yet? They should have done this a long time ago, and it just feels right sometimes.
Well, the best example of that, I think, with Tomasi is Damian. Because, Grant Morrison created him and introduced him and gave him some personality and made him somewhat likable in the Batman and Robin series.
But really, he was just he was more of a...
he was still a
he was a jerk.
Yeah.
He was a jerk, and he was a jerk, and he was more of a cipher for the storytelling and the big overall themes of of what Morrison was doing with his arc, rather than his own character. In a lot of ways, it felt like, oh, he has to be the new Robin, so we're gonna have him be Robin, so Dick Grayson can be Batman, and it was more about that concept than Damian as a character.
And it
so
worked, but yes, it was definitely a more for the story than anything.
Right, and so half of that time, Bruce is gone. Right, he's disappeared. So, I think you're about to say, like, the way that Tomasi is able to flesh Damian out as a character, especially as a pairing with Bruce later on.
Yeah, because he can still be a little
in Batman and Robin.
He can still be a little butthole sometimes, more often than not. But he is actually a sympathetic character now.
Mm-hmm.
Best version of Damian, Batman Ninja.
Oh gosh, yes. That movie was so insane. I loved every second of it.
It was great.
Go listen to our comment. We have a commentary podcast on that. It was pretty fun.
Fantastic.
Like, I can understand why people hated that movie, but I
loved it. I thought it was
blast.
I couldn't hate it. It's not my thing, and that like.
But knowing that for me made it so much better.
The fact that
I know it's not my thing, but I'm gonna enjoy the just sheer artistry and goofiness of it.
I mean, it's a movie where
it totally worked for me.
Batman's rogues gallery create a giant mech robot made out of Japanese temples.
Makes sense.
And then a bunch of monkeys come together and create a giant,
make a big Batman, a golden age Batman.
Amazing.
It's tremendous.
Yeah,
it was true. I mean, the only thing that could possibly top it is Batman versus Ninja Turtles.
Oh,
I'm excited about that
I'm looking forward to that one too.
Cool, buddy.
Yeah.
So, Lauer, what did you think of this?
I started
story?
us off. I thought, I liked the
Oh, did you? Okay.
Going through the rogues gallery, and I said it was just fine, but I don't mean that in a negative way at all. and just really, which is good, rather than me being like meh, because then that could lessen my excitement.
Are you more? I was gonna say, like, are you guys more or less excited now than you were before reading it about like the Arkham Knight being explored this way? Like, because to me it was like, oh, that's interesting. A character, I don't know how many times this has happened before. A character established from a video game now coming into mainstream comic book continuity, and sometimes like
essentially, I feel like it's outside of Harley Quinn. It doesn't happen too often. Outside of
too often
from one medium into the books.
Yeah, that's a good example.
I'm pumped for it because, like I said, it's a new iteration. I don't know what to expect. He has me guessing, and that's half the fun of reading the book. Like I don't want to read it and know already, like, okay, I know what you're going to do. Like, I want you to stump me on this. I want to go with Batman along on a ride and figure this out with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of,
and that's what I'm looking forward to.
It's kind of where I'm at. It didn't move, like, sway the needle anyway. I was already very intrigued of like, oh, cool, they're going to bring Arkham Knight into it. Let's see what they do. And that's kind of where I'm still at.
I do have a feeling that it was maybe an editorial thing to do it. Like, I don't necessarily think Tomasi was like, okay, I'm going to come on to Detective Comics, and then 6 issues in, I'm going to bring back Arkham Knight and put him in the actual continuity.
Oh, you think it was more like a Didio thing? Like, hey, you know what we should do? We should get the Arkham Knight, and you should write it.
That is exactly
one of those things,
how Dan Didio would have said it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it was. I mean, it may have been hey, we eventually want to bring him in, and we want you to do it because we want to, bring this. The game was popular, and it makes sense to have him actually exist in continuity. So I think maybe after his initial arc, felt like this was a good jumping off point. I think it was eventually we want you to do this, so just figure out when you want to do it. But I don't think it was totally him. But I don't think he's necessarily
sometimes. Yeah, and sometimes editorial mandates or suggestions can actually make the stories better in a lot of ways. Sometimes they can't. Yeah. Sometimes it's not good, but sometimes it works. It works out pretty well, because from a publishing standpoint, they got to move books, they got to sell books, they got to keep the characters relevant, and it's good when they're able to kind of try to head that off. And of course, having it happen in a Detective Comics 1000 is pretty cool. So I'm pretty optimistic. I think it's nobody better than Tomasi to do something like this, I think.
Do you think that this is the time for the Arkham Knight to be his own character, or do you think it's similar to the game where it's somebody else in disguise?
Well, I think the game's been out for a few years now, right? And they've thoroughly explored that character, that version of the character in the game and the comics that have come out too. Mm-hmm. So
I always forget about those books, but they're good.
I know, right? So I think that there's definitely room for more. Like, and that's what comics in particular are really good for, is like exploring some of the stories and avenues of narrative that might be a little too unmainstream friendly to do in a game or a movie.
Comics are almost a little bit more forgiving,
Yeah, because they come out every 2 weeks or every month, right?
We don't really hate the New 52 Superman anymore. Like, no one talks about that. I feel like that's kind of like we moved past
it was
that.
An experiment, and
now we have real Superman back. So there you go.
Yeah, and if you really cared about it, they did this crazy continuity thing where they made it all make sense, with the Superman Reborn stuff or whatever, which was a really fun arc to kind of make it make sense in continuity for super comics nerds. So I thought that was pretty neat. That had to be, that's a great example. I'm sure that was I would be hard pressed to think that somebody would be like, oh man, I need to make a story that's this. It was probably like an editorial thing that they were saying like, okay, we need to get Superman from point A to point B, and somebody's got to figure out how to take this mangled mess of a continuity and make it make sense. Hey, Dan Jurgens, come fix it.
We need you to write Superman again.
It was him that wrote that story, right?
I believe
Superman
so.
Reborn.
Yeah, it was him and Tomasi and Gleason.
See, there you go. So yeah, it reinforces my point even more. So So I'm excited about the the future of Detective Comics. I think it's never been brighter, really. I mean, it's great that they changed the numbering. They're back to 1,000, and it's going to be.
It has
cool.
a direction.
So
I think, which is what's
good. Yeah, for sure.
Like,
especially while and I'm sorry that I'm vastly more interested in following this than the Tom King stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because sometimes, like, what was it, the last issue of the King run? Like, there were no words, there was nothing to read.
I've liked Tom King's.
I haven't
run.
caught up,
it
but
was weird.
surprised.
Like,
but
there was nothing.
Yeah, this whole
Usually
nightmares
he includes like noises, but
this whole nightmares.
There were
story.
beep beeps because it was Roadrunner.
Oh no, you got! I'm not looking forward to
Okay,
catching
it's
up now.
effectively a sequel, sort of, to Batman Elmer Fudd, which
Oh no,
you didn't like that.
I love that
Okay.
one.
It works here. It's not
I
like
did
a
like
bad-
that one.
Yeah, I mean,
he just doesn't want it to be ruined.
oh, okay. I mean, it's Lee Weeks and Jorge Fornes drew Batman. What is it? 67. I've lost track. 67.
Yes,
It looks phenomenal. It is effectively a chase scene.
beautiful.
There's no substance to it, but it's still fun. It's just there's not an awful lot to it.
yeah.
My favorite. We were talking earlier when the stories in this book. One of my favorite Tom King issues in his run was that Matt Wagner Dick Grayson issue.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Was super good. That was super good. Talk about a modern day, story about between flipping back and forth between Nightwing and Robin, with Dick Grayson as the anchor point in that story. That was great,
Yes.
great stuff. But so let's to wrap up on Detective 1000. What did you guys think of the issue overall, and what were your favorite stories, like top 3 or top 1 favorite stories in the book?
I mean, I just overall the book is just wonderfully drawn. Like, every story is really well drawn, even though, like, I definitely favor some stories over another. I think artistically, all the stories look fantastic. As far as my favorite stories, it has to be the Matches Malone story, and the story about what was his name? The guy with the cauliflower ear. What the hell was his name?
Brody.
Newt Brody.
Yeah, Brody. The Brody story. Those two are my favorite stories. I really enjoyed those.
I think the issue overall for me is definitely I could have it out at my bedside table all the time and just grab it and just read a story real quick if I need to. Like Pete just said, all of them looked good. Some I didn't care for a whole lot. But definitely, I mean, it worth the $10. My favorite story is definitely Manufacture for Use, which is the Kevin Smith, Jim Lee bat symbol story. I just thought that one stood out the most and had the greatest impact on the first read. But overall, the issue, I'd say probably an A or A minus. Got to choose one. A minus. Done.
Cool.
When I initially read it, it kind of took me the better part of an afternoon just to get through it, which really didn't speak well to what I thought of it initially. There were stories that I really liked, none that I necessarily loved, though in talking about it, I feel like I came to appreciate the stories that I liked more than I initially did, and even some of the stories I didn't necessarily like, a few of those I liked more. As opposed to, I alluded to this earlier, I felt like Action Comics 1000 was a celebration of Superman, and every story in that issue I thought was phenomenal and just did what it needed to do in being a celebration of Action Comics as a whole, and Superman specifically. Detective 1000 just feels like a lot of really, really talented creators writing a Batman story, and that's not necessarily bad. It's just I think some of them work better than others. But it's still worth getting. I mean, even just for just how monumental and historical the issue is. I would give it, maybe a B plus, just overall. And my personal favorite story, when I initially read it, and even after our discussion here, has got to be The Precedent by James Tynion IV and Alvaro Martinez Bueno.
Mm-hmm. Nice. My thoughts are pretty much right on the money with what you're saying, Jay. If I had to give it a grade, it might be a B+, but once I get my hands on an actual copy and start seeing all the variants, and I'm flipping through it in real life or whatever, it'll probably bump it up to like an A- or something like that, just because I think it's going to change the experience a little bit. So I'm looking forward to getting all my copies. But so I wrote down. So as we were going through all this, I wrote down. I thought I was going to wind up with the top 5, but I actually ended up with the top 4 of my favorite stories in the book. And going from 4 to 1 is Legend of Newt Brody. I put 4th. Batman's Longest Case. That was the Scott Snyder Capullo story. That was number 3. The Precedent I put at number 2, and Manufacture for Use I put as my top favorite story of the book. Yeah. So, and I think that speaks to like the quality of the stories. Like, it covers a wide breadth of Batman topics and feelings and emotional, poignant points of why the character means what he means to people. And I don't think you could ask for more than that in the Detective Comics number 1000. So I thought overall it's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, between the variants and just the celebration of Batman, it's a good time. It's just fun. Like, and you open the pages,
definitely pick it up. Obviously, and hopefully you're not listening to this unless you picked it up.
And you've got big name Batman people contributing to the issue, from Neil Adams to Denny O'Neil to Paul Dini to Scott Snyder to Greg Capullo. I mean, like it is. While it's not as out there as Action was, it still is a celebration, and it's fun to get all those collaborators in one spot.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we did a pretty awesome job, not to toot our own horn, of covering this entire book in just over 2 hours. So, job well done. So I guess let's start with some plugs and get on out of here. Let's start with Jay.
All right, you can find me personally on Twitter. My personal handle is @JAYAWS. And as I said earlier, I have my own site, comics-now.com, and a podcast, also called Comics Now, where we're probably going to discuss Detective Comics 1000 this week as well. This is a nice primer there. Yeah, check us out there. We do have a Patreon. Patreon.com/comicsnow. We are also on Twitter and Instagram at ComicsNowCast. YouTube, search for Comics Now. And there's a Belgian gentleman who also does comic stuff. That's not us. Ooh. We are the other Comics Now. And then find us on Facebook. Just search for Comics Now. Just like us there. And we're on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, which we were just recently put on this past weekend.
Fantastic. Nice. What do you got, Pete Verra? You've got a review of this coming up.
I do.
Probably by the time that this podcast
I didn't
is
give my letter grade. I'll save that for review. So you keep coming back for more. You like that? Right now on BOF. No. Wednesday's a big day, bro. Wednesday's a big day.
It's true.
What else do I have? I have a really fun top 10 list of the music from and inspired by theatrical Batman, which covers everything from 89 to Lego Batman. So we got some cool songs in there, top 10 tracks, totally up for debate, but I think I pretty much nailed it. I really do.
It's a great article. It's so much fun.
It's especially when you look back at like, oh, this song came out here, but it wasn't until it was on Forever that it blew up and took over the world, and it's crazy.
I thought that was a great anecdote, and reading the article makes you totally want to like listen to the songs or watch the music videos.
And the music videos are there. I think there's only one. I think it's Trust is the only one that doesn't have a music video. Right. I think it just has a scene. That's by Prince from 89. And there's music videos, there's scenes. Sometimes there's both. Some really good stuff. And, just as always, just a quick reminder, Eric Holzman and I will be back for our Green Room show, the Gotham post-game show.
2 episodes left.
2 episodes left, April 18th. So it's a bit away, but we got 2 episodes left. And we have 1 episode before a 10-year time jump. So we got 1 episode before we actually see Batman in Gotham. So that'll happen on April 18th. And yeah, I'll see you guys on Wednesday when my review of this issue drops.
I haven't watched
Sweet.
Gotham since like the first episode of the 2nd season. If I jump in now, will I be able to catch up?
My.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't
I'm
matter.
just kidding.
You just need
If you just jump in on season 5 as it starts and everything seems weird to you, just know that it was weird before that also, and it's going to keep being weird.
Jay, if you really haven't watched in season 2, the only episode you really probably should watch is the last one.
Is the finale.
Yeah.
Where it's 10 years after and he's apparently Batman.
That's what I did with Smallville. Like, I never actually watched the show. I went back and eventually watched it, but when the series finale aired, I watched like the last 15 minutes to see him in his Superman costume and was very disappointed.
Aw. I'm sorry for you because I unapologetically just love Smallville.
Oh, I came to enjoy it. John Snyder, great podcast. You know.
Oh my gosh, he is
lots
so
of great
good.
Stuff with it, but anyway, that's
I'll have to give it a rewatch.
I would say my quick thing about that though, yeah, do that after Gotham, Pete. Go and rewatch 10 seasons of Smallville.
Jeez, like I have that kind of
Just wait until you get to season 3.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, I would say, like, I've said this on a previous show too, like season 5, this final season of Gotham is easily the best season of Gotham, which to me is not, I mean, it's your mileage may vary, of course, because it's Gotham, but it's easily the best season, and Jay, like, it's only going to be 12 episodes?
Yes, it's only 12
right, Pete?
episodes.
It's only 12 episodes long, so it's kind of a half of a season. So if you jump in, yeah, there's not you'll catch up quicker than if it was a normal regular season. So it's only a few weeks away. There's like a 2 or 3 week jump before these last 2 episodes come out. So it's a pretty good time to jump on. They've done some cool things, like they've done some interesting things this season. I changed my cool to an interesting. They've had there's Bane, there's Poison Ivy, they did
the Ivy stuff I don't mind.
The Ivy stuff I hated, but I was really impressed with and we talked about this on the last episode too, I believe. I was impressed with the what they were able to do with ventriloquist in the episode that they did.
It wasn't their worst move, but I still don't approve of it. But like, it wasn't the worst thing they've done.
Yeah, for what
Heck
Gotham
of an
is, I was
endorsement. It's not the worst thing they've done.
I know. That's Gotham
Well,
for you.
I mean,
but,
what they did to Mr. Freeze is damn near unforgivable. I mean, just.
Oh well, yeah. I don't like Freeze. Anyway, does Lauer? Do you need to plug some stuff?
You can follow me on Twitter at Lauer_Ryan.
Lauer spelled
That's
lower.
right. Thank you. I recently did a review on the Detective Comics 80 Years of Batman book review for Batman on Film.
Oh, that's a good
Thank
review.
you.
I read that.
It's worth buying and to celebrate for Detective Comics. Goes perfectly with this 1000 issue. Other than that, I've got a top 10 list coming up soon. And that's all I got.
I also reviewed that
Cool.
80 years of Batman Detective Comics at Comics Now as well. So there you go.
Did you like it?
I did. I liked it very much.
Excellent.
Slam Bradley.
That's right.
Oh, love Slam.
Boom.
I feel like we're churning out a bunch of top 10 lists over at BOF.
I need a Slam Bradley Shotgun Smith team up.
Oh man, I
book.
would write that.
Can we have it in the?
Isn't that
Can we bring back
amazing?
the Brave and the Bold and put them in there?
Yes.
Oh my god! And just make it like Brave and the Bold,
Yeah.
but just make it
Old school Detective Comics.
Slam Bradley Shotgun Smith team up hour or whatever. Oh my gosh, it'll be amazing. But so for me, follow me on Twitter follow me on Twitter at SMB_Ryan. Yes, I can remember my own Twitter. Follow the Batman Podcast Network at BatPod Network. And for some other plugs, definitely go back and listen to episode 139, where we dissect Batman's No Guns, No Killing rule. I'm still really proud of that show, and I forgot to plug it on the last show, so I wanted to make sure to plug it here. So do that. And I was also going to plug an article my pal Matt Whaley wrote for BOF. We were talking earlier in this episode about the Kelly Jones story in Detective Comics 1000, and we are doing a lot of retrospectives on Elseworlds books on BOF right now, and my pal Matt Whaley wrote a really good introductory retrospective on the Kelly Jones and Doug Munch Batman Red Rain. So if whether you've read that story or not, definitely check out that retrospective, because it's a pretty good breakdown of that story and kind of what that whole thing's all about. So do that. And I guess that's all I have to plug. So that wraps up today's episode. For Jay, Pete, and Ryan, I'm Ryan. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey now! You've been listening to the Batman on Film podcast, a proud member and the sponsor of the Batman Podcast Network, BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. You can listen to the BOF podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, TuneIn, and wherever good podcasts like this one can be found. Want to advertise on the BOF podcast? Go to advertisecast.com/the Batman on Film Con podcast. Follow Jet on Twitter at Batman on Film and on BOF's Facebook fan page at facebook.com/jet.batmanonfilm. Email Jet via jet@batman-on-film.com. I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening.